Here are 13 of the dumbest cars in America from the 1970s. Cars that left people wondering, what were they thinking? Despite a decade known for experimentation, these models stand out for all the wrong reasons. The 1977 Chevrolet Monza was introduced as a compact car meant to rival the rising tide of sporty subcompacts that were becoming popular in the mid to late 1970s. With its sleek, European-inspired design, the Monza initially appeared to have a lot of potential. Its low profile and aggressive styling gave it a sporty, appealing look that drew attention from buyers hoping for a smaller car that could still pack a punch in terms of performance and style. However, despite its good looks, the Monza fell short in several key areas, most notably its engine options, reliability, and cramped interior. One of the Monza's major downfalls was its poor engine options. At a time when many buyers were looking for cars with enough power to be both practical and fun to drive, the Monza's engines felt underwhelming. The base models came equipped with smaller four-cylinder engines that were woefully underpowered, especially when compared to competitors. The available V6 and V8 options, while more promising on paper, were also plagued with issues. In many cases, the V8 engine would struggle under the weight of the car's emissions control equipment, leading to sluggish acceleration and poor overall performance. The car's performance was further hampered by its heavy design, which made even the more powerful engines feel lethargic. Even when equipped with a larger engine, the Monza couldn't live up to the sporty image it tried to convey. For those expecting sharp acceleration or a dynamic driving experience, the Monza's slow and unresponsive handling proved to be a disappointment. The car lacked the punch that many drivers sought in a compact sports car, making it hard to compete with other models like the Ford Mustang II or the Pontiac Sunbird, which offered more engaging driving experiences. Reliability was another significant issue with the 1977 Monza. Buyers soon discovered that the car was plagued by frequent mechanical problems, ranging from engine failures to electrical issues. The engine's durability, especially in models equipped with the V8, became a major concern, with many owners reporting overheating and frequent breakdowns. Additionally, the transmission wasn't particularly robust, leading to issues with shifting and overall drivability. These mechanical shortcomings made the Monza an unreliable choice for daily driving, which only compounded its problems in the competitive compact car market. On top of its engine and reliability problems, the Chevrolet Monza also had a notoriously cramped interior. While the sleek design of the car might have been eye-catching, it didn't translate well into interior comfort. The small cabin offered very little legroom or headroom for passengers, and the rear seats were especially tight. Even for a compact car, the Monza felt particularly confined, which made longer trips uncomfortable. The interior materials were also of subpar quality, giving the cabin a cheap and plasticky feel that detracted from the overall experience. This lack of comfort made it hard for buyers to justify choosing the Monza over competitors that offered more spacious and better appointed interiors. The Monza's troubles were exacerbated by the oil crisis of the 1970s, which put a premium on fuel efficiency. Unfortunately for Chevrolet, the Monza didn't excel in this area either. Despite being a compact car, its weight and inefficient engines led to unimpressive fuel economy numbers. This made it difficult for the Monza to compete with other small cars that offered better fuel efficiency, which was a crucial factor for buyers during this period of high gas prices. The Monza's fuel efficiency issues, combined with its reliability problems, turned it into a car that was expensive to own and maintain, further alienating potential buyers. Despite Chevrolet's efforts to market the Monza as a sporty alternative in the compact car segment, it ultimately failed to deliver on its promises. The car's poor engine options, frequent mechanical issues, and cramped interior left buyers feeling underwhelmed, especially when compared to competitors that offered better performance, reliability, and comfort. For many, the 1977 Chevrolet Monza is remembered as a car that looked promising from the outside, but fell flat once you got behind the wheel. While its sleek design might have initially attracted buyers, the Monza's many shortcomings ensured that it couldn't live up to the expectations set by its sporty appearance. In retrospect, the Monza serves as a cautionary tale of how critical it is for an automaker to balance design with functionality. The car's looks couldn't make up for its lack of performance and reliability, and its cramped interior made it less appealing for families or those needing a practical daily driver. While the Monza had the potential to be a strong contender in the compact car market, its mechanical flaws and impractical design ultimately doomed it to be a disappointment. The 1970 Plymouth Superbird is one of the most iconic and extreme cars to come out of the muscle car era, built specifically to dominate the NASCAR circuit. Born out of a fierce rivalry between Ford and Chrysler in the world of racing, the Superbird was Plymouth's answer to the highly successful Dodge Charger Daytona, with both vehicles pushing the limits of aerodynamic design to gain a competitive edge. While it has since become a highly sought-after collector's item, at the time of its release, the Superbird's radical design, particularly its over-the-top aerodynamics, made it an impractical car for everyday driving. The Superbird's most noticeable feature was its towering rear wing, which soared nearly 2 feet above the car's trunk. This massive wing was not just for show, it was a functional element designed to provide significant downforce at high speeds, keeping the car glued to the track during NASCAR races. The engineers at Plymouth carefully crafted the wing to reduce drag and enhance stability, but it was placed so high above the car to allow the trunk to open fully, another unusual compromise that added to its exaggerated appearance. For everyday drivers, however, this massive wing was unnecessary and even a bit absurd. It stuck out awkwardly in traffic, making the Superbird look more like a spaceship than a car designed for public roads. The Superbird's aerodynamic features didn't stop at the wing. The car's nose was extended with a pointed fiberglass cone to further reduce drag and increase top speed. This elongated front end gave the car a distinctive look, but made it difficult to maneuver and park in normal driving situations. The sheer length of the nose made the Superbird cumbersome on city streets and impractical for daily driving. While these design elements were necessary for NASCAR's high-speed demands, they felt out of place on a car marketed to the general public. In addition to its outlandish design, the Superbird was also a heavy car, which impacted its performance outside of the racetrack. Its powerful V8 engines, the most famous being the 426 Hemi, delivered incredible straight-line speed, but the car's weight and aerodynamic drag made it less nimble than some of its competitors. For the average driver, the Superbird's handling could feel sluggish and unrefined, especially when compared to other muscle cars of the era that balanced power with better drivability. The focus on high-speed aerodynamics came at the expense of everyday practicality, which limited the car's appeal to general consumers. Another reason the Superbird struggled to find immediate success was that it was simply too extreme for the typical buyer in 1970. While muscle car enthusiasts appreciated the Superbird's bold looks and racing pedigree, the average driver found it impractical and even a bit gaudy. The oversized wing, the elongated nose, and the overall size of the car made it difficult to use as a daily driver. Its massive proportions were intimidating, and parking or navigating tight spaces was a challenge. In a market filled with more versatile and user-friendly muscle cars, the Superbird's NASCAR-inspired design felt like overkill for the road. At the time of its release, the Superbird was seen as a niche vehicle. Plymouth produced it in limited numbers to meet NASCAR's homologation rules, which required manufacturers to sell a certain number of their race cars to the public. This meant that many Superbirds ended up sitting unsold on dealership lots, as their extreme design failed to attract enough everyday buyers. Dealerships struggled to move the cars, and some even resorted to removing the rear wing to make the Superbird more appealing to customers. For most drivers, the car was simply too much, too big, too bold, and too impractical. Despite its initial lukewarm reception, the Plymouth Superbird has since become a legend in the automotive world, admired for its bold design, racing success, and rarity. What was once considered over the top is now celebrated as a testament to the wild experimentation of the muscle car era. Collectors and enthusiasts view the Superbird as a prized piece of automotive history, and its unique combination of power, performance, and eye-catching design has made it a highly sought-after classic car. But back in 1970, the Superbird's extreme aerodynamics were just too much for the average driver, and it struggled to find its place on the road. In hindsight, the Superbird represents an era when car manufacturers were willing to push the boundaries of design and performance in pursuit of success on the racetrack. While its exaggerated features may have made it impractical for daily driving, they were a necessary part of the car's mission to dominate NASCAR. Today, the Superbird stands as an icon of automotive history, celebrated for its boldness and innovation. However, during its original production run, it was a car that was ahead of its time. The 1975 Ford Elite was introduced as a personal luxury coupe, a segment that was growing in popularity during the mid-1970s. Ford positioned the Elite as an affordable alternative to higher-end luxury coupes like the Thunderbird and Lincoln Mark IV. However, despite its aspirations, the Elite failed to live up to its promise, becoming a symbol of the excesses and disappointments of the era. With its bulky design, underpowered engine, and unattractive styling, the Ford Elite struggled to find a lasting place in the automotive landscape, especially in the wake of rising fuel prices and changing consumer preferences. One of the biggest issues with the Ford Elite was its excessive weight. Weighing in at around 4,000 pounds, the car was far from nimble. The Elite's large, heavy frame made it cumbersome to drive, and it had none of the agility or grace one might expect from a luxury coupe. Its bulk translated into sluggish acceleration and poor handling, which was a significant drawback for drivers who expected a balance of luxury and performance. In an era when car makers were striving to offer vehicles that combined comfort with at least some degree of driving excitement, the Elite fell short. Adding to the Elite's struggles was its underpowered engine. While it was available with a choice of V8 engines, ranging from a 351 cubic inch to a 460 cubic inch, the emissions regulations and fuel economy concerns of the 1970s had severely hampered engine performance across the board. The larger engines, though capable of producing decent power on paper, were strangled by the emissions equipment, resulting in sluggish acceleration and poor throttle response. The car's power output was simply not enough to overcome its massive weight, making the driving experience feel lethargic and underwhelming. This lack of power was especially disappointing for buyers who were expecting a luxurious, yet somewhat sporty driving experience. Fuel efficiency was another significant problem for the Ford Elite, and this came at a particularly bad time. The mid-1970s were marked by the aftermath of the oil crisis, and consumers were increasingly concerned about fuel consumption. The Elite's large V8 engines, coupled with its hefty weight, made it a notorious gas guzzler. At a time when fuel efficiency was becoming a priority for many car buyers, the Elite's poor mileage was a major disadvantage. With fuel economy figures often hovering in the single digits, it was not the kind of car drivers wanted to fill up frequently, especially as gas prices were rising. The design of the Ford Elite also failed to inspire. While personal luxury cars were often known for their striking and opulent designs, the Elite's styling came across as bland and uninspired. Its boxy, slab-sided profile was far from sleek, and its awkward proportions gave the car a bloated appearance. The front end was dominated by a large, square grille flanked by rectangular headlights, which added to its heavy, cumbersome look. Compared to some of its competitors, which offered more elegant or daring designs, the Elite simply didn't stand out in any meaningful way. Its styling may have been acceptable for the time, but it certainly didn't evoke the sense of luxury or sophistication that Ford was hoping to convey. Inside the car, the interior also left much to be desired. While the Elite was marketed as a personal luxury coupe, the cabin felt more utilitarian than upscale. The materials used in the interior were often of lower quality than what buyers might expect from a luxury car, with a lot of vinyl and plastic dominating the dashboard and seating areas. The seats, though large and cushioned, lacked the refinement and comfort that luxury buyers were looking for. The car's overall fit and finish didn't compare favorably with the more upscale models it was trying to compete against, leaving buyers feeling underwhelmed by the Elite's level of luxury. The timing of the Ford Elite's release also didn't do it any favors. By 1975, the automotive industry was undergoing significant changes. The oil crisis had shifted consumer priorities toward more fuel-efficient and practical vehicles, and the Elite, with its gas-guzzling engines and bulky frame, felt like a relic of a bygone era. Drivers were beginning to value economy, practicality, and modern technology over size and excess. And the elite's emphasis on size without much substance didn't align with this new reality. In the end, the 1975 Ford Elite stands as an example of a car that missed the mark on multiple fronts. It was too bulky, underpowered, and unattractive to be competitive in the market, especially during a period when consumers were shifting their focus toward more efficient and stylish vehicles. What was supposed to be an affordable personal luxury coupe turned out to be a car that offered neither luxury nor performance, making it an ill-suited option for the changing times. The 1971 Pontiac Ventura was Pontiac's attempt to compete in the growing compact car market, but despite the brand's reputation for muscle cars and performance, the Ventura fell short in both performance and styling. Originally introduced as a sub-model of the Pontiac Tempest, the Ventura was essentially a rebadged version of the Chevrolet Nova, which meant that it didn't offer much in terms of originality. For a brand that had cultivated a reputation with iconic models like the GTO, the Ventura left Pontiac fans underwhelmed and disappointed. One of the most significant issues with the Pontiac Ventura was its lackluster performance. While Pontiac was known for producing high-powered, performance-oriented cars during the 1960s and early 1970s, the Ventura didn't live up to that heritage. It was offered with a range of engines from inline sixes to small block V8s, but none of them truly stood out. The base inline six engine was underpowered, especially when compared to the muscle cars that Pontiac was known for. Even the optional V8 engines, while offering more power, didn't provide the same thrilling performance that buyers had come to expect from the brand. In a time when muscle cars were still highly sought after, the Ventura's mediocre engine options felt like a letdown. Adding to the Ventura's performance woes was its uninspired styling. Pontiac had a history of producing bold, aggressive designs that set their cars apart from the competition, but the Ventura didn't have that same visual appeal. Its design was plain and unexciting, and it closely resembled the Chevrolet Nova, from which it was derived. This rebadging was a major point of criticism, as it didn't offer any unique Pontiac flair or personality. The grille and trim were slightly altered to give it a Pontiac look, but beyond that, it was difficult to differentiate the Ventura from its Nova counterpart. This lack of distinctiveness made it hard for the Ventura to carve out its own identity in the crowded compact car market. The interior of the Ventura didn't do much to elevate the driving experience either. The materials used were basic, and the overall design of the cabin felt dated and uninspired. While it was functional, it lacked the sense of luxury or sportiness that buyers might have been hoping for, especially given Pontiac's performance reputation. The dashboard was simple, with no standout features or innovative design elements. Overall, the interior felt utilitarian rather than refined, further contributing to the feeling that the Ventura was an afterthought rather than a carefully crafted addition to the Pontiac lineup. The handling of the Ventura also left much to be desired. Being based on the same platform as the Chevrolet Nova, it shared the same suspension and chassis setup, which was far from sporty. While it was adequate for day-to-day driving, the Ventura didn't offer the sharp handling or responsive feel that some buyers might have expected from a smaller Pontiac model. It was more of a standard commuter car than a performance-oriented vehicle, which was disappointing for enthusiasts who associated the Pontiac badge with excitement and power on the road. At a time when the market was shifting toward more fuel-efficient and practical vehicles, the Ventura was caught in an awkward middle ground. It wasn't powerful enough to appeal to muscle car fans, and it wasn't stylish or fuel-efficient enough to attract economy-minded buyers. As a result, it struggled to make a lasting impression in the automotive landscape of the early 1970s. The Ventura's rebadged identity also meant that it had to compete with the Nova, which had its own loyal following. For Pontiac fans who expected something more distinctive and performance-oriented, the Ventura didn't measure up. In the broader context of Pontiac's history, the 1971 Pontiac Ventura is often remembered as a missed opportunity. While it filled a niche in the compact car market, it didn't do so with the flair, power, or style that people expected from the brand. For a company that had created some of the most iconic performance cars of the 1960s, the Ventura felt like a step backward. Its mediocre performance, uninspired styling, and lack of unique features made it an underwhelming addition to Pontiac's lineup. While the Ventura would later evolve into the Ventura 2 and eventually become the platform for the legendary Pontiac GTO in some forms, the 1971 model remains a reminder that not every Pontiac could capture the magic that the brand was known for. In retrospect, the Ventura's lack of distinct identity and underwhelming performance are what ultimately caused it to be viewed as a disappointment. It wasn't a bad car in terms of reliability or basic functionality, but it simply didn't stand out in a market that was quickly evolving. Pontiac had built its brand on excitement, power, and bold designs. The 1973 AMC Hornet hatchback was intended to be an affordable and practical car for American consumers, but its quirky design and inconsistent build quality ultimately worked against it. While AMC had built a reputation for offering unique or budget-friendly vehicles, the Hornet hatchback exemplified many of the company's flaws, including rust issues and mechanical reliability problems that would tarnish its reputation over time. One of the standout features of the Hornet was its unconventional hatchback design. AMC aimed to create a car that could appeal to a wide variety of drivers, offering versatility in terms of cargo space and functionality. However, in an era when most American consumers were still enamored with more traditional sedans or muscle cars, the hatchback style of the Hornet stood out, and not always in a good way. The boxy, somewhat awkward proportions didn't quite capture the sleek lines or bold presence that other cars in its class were known for. Instead, it looked utilitarian and, to many, unattractive. This quirky design also extended to the interior of the Hornet, which felt outdated and basic even for an economy car. While it was functional, the materials used inside were often cheap and prone to wear and tear. The dashboard layout was simplistic and lacked any real innovation, making it clear that cost-cutting measures had taken priority over quality. For buyers looking for a bit of refinement or a feeling of value, the Hornet didn't deliver much beyond the essentials. Build quality was another significant issue for the 1973 AMC Hornet hatchback. The car suffered from inconsistent assembly, with some models performing well mechanically, while others were plagued with issues right off the production line. Rust was a notorious problem for AMC vehicles during this period, and the Hornet was no exception. The body panels and undercarriage were particularly susceptible to rust, especially in areas with harsh winters or high humidity. Many owners found their Hornets falling apart much sooner than expected, which damaged the car's long-term appeal and resale value. The rust issues were exacerbated by the car's low-cost materials, making it difficult to maintain a pristine example of the vehicle even with regular upkeep. In addition to rust, mechanical problems were a frequent complaint among Hornet owners. The car was available with a range of engine options, from a modest inline-six to a V8, but none of these were particularly exciting. The engines were known for being underpowered, especially when compared to competitors from Ford and Chevrolet, which had larger and more refined powertrains. The Hornet's acceleration was sluggish, and its handling didn't inspire confidence, especially at higher speeds. Even with the V8 option, the car felt more like a workhorse than a sporty or dynamic driving experience. Beyond performance, mechanical reliability was a significant issue for the 1973 Hornet. The car suffered from a variety of problems, from engine failures to transmission issues, that often required frequent trips to the mechanic. This lack of reliability made the Hornet a frustrating ownership experience for many, especially for those who purchased it as an affordable and dependable daily driver. The combination of rust, mechanical failures, and inconsistent quality control meant that the Hornet wasn't a car that buyers could rely on for the long haul. Despite its many flaws, the AMC Hornet hatchback did have some appeal in its versatility. The hatchback design, while polarizing, did offer a decent amount of cargo space for a small car. This made it a practical option for families or individuals who needed a vehicle that could handle both daily commuting and the occasional road trip or large load of groceries. The Hornet was also relatively affordable compared to some of its competitors, which helped it maintain a presence in the market even with its shortcomings. In hindsight, however, the Hornet hatchback's quirky design and mediocre build quality have come to symbolize many of the problems that led to AMC's eventual decline as an automaker. While the company was known for thinking outside the box and producing cars that were different from the mainstream, the Hornet's design wasn't enough to overcome its significant reliability and rust issues. For many buyers, the Hornet was a disappointment, especially when compared to the more polished offerings from larger automakers during the same period. The 1973 AMC Hornet hatchback serves as a reminder of the challenges that smaller automakers faced in competing with the Big Three in the American automotive industry. AMC's commitment to affordability and practicality was admirable, but the company's inability to consistently produce cars that could meet the demands of consumers ultimately limited its success. The 1970 Buick Riviera was Buick's attempt at creating a grand luxury coupe with an imposing presence. And on that front, it certainly succeeded. It was a car that epitomized the lavish, excess-driven automotive culture of the time. With a massive body, powerful V8 engine, and an interior designed to cradle passengers in comfort. However, as much as the Riviera impressed in terms of style and power, it also came with significant drawbacks that made it a poor fit for the fuel-conscious, practicality-driven market of the 1970s. At the heart of the 1970 Riviera was its enormous 7.5-liter V8 engine, which produced a considerable amount of horsepower, giving the car a strong and confident presence on the road. For drivers who craved raw power, the Riviera delivered. The engine roared to life with authority, allowing the car to glide smoothly along highways, swallowing miles with ease. However, this impressive performance came at a steep cost: fuel consumption. The Riviera was a notorious gas guzzler, at a time when rising fuel prices and growing environmental concerns were making consumers more mindful of their fuel use. This wasn't just a minor issue. The Riviera's thirst for gasoline became a major disadvantage in the increasingly fuel-conscious 1970s. The 1973 oil crisis had not yet hit in full force when the Riviera was released, but by the time it did, cars like the Riviera were seen as relics of an earlier time when efficiency wasn't a priority. The Riviera's low fuel efficiency became one of its most glaring flaws, especially when compared to smaller, more fuel-efficient vehicles that were gaining popularity. While the car's large engine provided ample power, it was overkill for many drivers who didn't need such a massive amount of horsepower for daily use. The trade-off between power and fuel economy was no longer appealing to a market that was tightening its belt in the face of higher gas prices. Beyond fuel consumption, the Riviera's sheer size posed other challenges. It was an exceptionally large car, stretching nearly 220 inches in length. While this provided a spacious and comfortable cabin, it also made the car cumbersome to drive, especially in urban environments. Maneuvering the Riviera through tight city streets or attempting to park it in crowded lots was a challenge in itself. The car's wide turning radius and overall bulk made it feel more like driving a boat than a nimble coupe. For drivers who valued ease of use and practicality, the Riviera's size was a clear downside, especially as smaller, more agile cars were becoming the norm. The interior of the Riviera was another area where Buick aimed to emphasize luxury over practicality. The cabin was richly appointed, with plush seats, soft materials, and all the amenities one would expect from a high-end luxury car of the era. Passengers could sit back and enjoy a ride that was remarkably smooth, thanks to the car's soft suspension and the isolating effect of its heavy body. However, even here, the car's excessive focus on comfort had a downside. The soft suspension, while great for gliding over bumps, also made the car feel floaty and disconnected from the road. Handling wasn't the Riviera's strong suit. It prioritized comfort at the expense of driver engagement, which was a disappointment for those who were looking for a more dynamic driving experience. In terms of styling, the 1970 Riviera continued Buick's tradition of creating bold, imposing designs. The car's sweeping lines, long hood, and wide grille gave it an air of authority and elegance. However, this design also made the car feel even more massive than it already was. While it was certainly eye-catching, the Riviera's aesthetics couldn't mask its underlying impracticality. By the 1970s, tastes were starting to shift, and the Riviera's ornate, oversized look began to feel out of step with the times. More streamlined, efficient designs were becoming the norm, leaving the Riviera feeling like a product of a bygone era. The Riviera also faced stiff competition from other luxury cars that were starting to incorporate more modern engineering and better fuel efficiency without sacrificing comfort. Cadillac, Lincoln, and even some European brands were making inroads into the American luxury market, offering vehicles that managed to balance performance with practicality. Against this backdrop, the Riviera's massive size and poor fuel economy made it seem outdated. Despite its flaws, the 1970 Buick Riviera did have a certain charm that appealed to a niche group of buyers. Its imposing presence, powerful engine, and luxurious interior made it a statement car, one that symbolized success and excess in equal measure. However, for the broader market, it simply didn't make sense. The 1970s were an era of change in the automotive world, and cars like the Riviera, which were designed in the spirit of the freewheeling 1960s, struggled to keep up with the more practical. The 1976 Plymouth Volare was introduced with high hopes, aimed at replacing the long-standing Plymouth Valiant. Chrysler marketed the Volare as a fresh, modern alternative in the compact car segment, hoping to draw in consumers with its sleek design, smoother ride, and improved comfort. However, the reality of the Volare's performance and build quality painted a very different picture. What was meant to be an innovative step forward quickly became a symbol of poor craftsmanship and reliability issues, earning the Volare a lasting reputation for failure. One of the most notorious problems with the Volare was its severe rust issues. Despite being a new model, the Volare seemed to deteriorate faster than many older cars on the road. In regions with harsh winters, especially in the northern US and Canada, the car was particularly prone to rusting. Its rust vulnerability extended beyond typical wear and tear areas like the undercarriage and wheel wells. Owners reported that even the body panels and doors would start showing signs of rust within just a couple of years of purchase. This wasn't just a minor cosmetic issue. Rust in critical structural components like the frame and suspension mounts made the car less safe to drive over time. The issue became so widespread that the Volare, along with its Dodge counterpart, the Aspen, was often the subject of jokes and ridicule for quickly turning into rust buckets. Aside from the rust epidemic, the Volare also had significant build quality issues that plagued its reputation. Chrysler attempted to incorporate a more refined suspension system to offer a smoother, more comfortable ride. However, this new torsion-quiet suspension system was prone to breaking down, leading to frequent complaints of squeaking, clunking sounds, and poor handling. The suspension problems weren't just annoying, but also affected the safety and drivability of the car, leaving many owners frustrated. But the problems didn't stop there. The engine quality and mechanical reliability of the Volare were also major areas of concern. While the car was offered with a range of engine options, including a slant 6 and a V8, the engines themselves were prone to stalling and failing prematurely. Many owners found themselves stranded on the side of the road due to issues with carburetors, ignition systems, and fuel pumps. These mechanical issues were compounded by the fact that parts were often unreliable and would break or malfunction, sometimes within months of ownership. For a car that was supposed to be an upgrade over the Valiant, the Volare felt like a step backward in terms of dependability. Another aspect that made the Volare's failures particularly hard to swallow was the fact that it launched during a period when the American auto industry was under pressure to improve quality and compete with increasingly popular imports. Japanese cars like the Toyota Corolla and Honda Civic were gaining a reputation for their reliability and longevity, and they were becoming serious contenders in the US market. By contrast, the Volare represented everything that was going wrong with American manufacturing at the time. Corners were cut, quality control was lax, and consumers were left with a product that couldn't meet their expectations. The interior quality also didn't help the Volare's case. While Chrysler had intended to give the car a more upscale feel, the materials used in the interior were cheap and prone to wear. Seats would tear or lose their shape, dashboards would crack, and switches and knobs would break with alarming regularity. Even small issues like poorly fitting door panels or rattling trim pieces contributed to an overall sense that the car was hastily put together without much care for long-term durability. All of these problems combined to create a perfect storm of unreliability, and by the late 1970s, the Volare was infamous for leaving its owners stranded. It was common for breakdowns to occur without warning, whether due to engine troubles, faulty suspension, or rusted-out components. Chrysler's warranty department was inundated with claims. But the widespread nature of the issues meant that many owners simply gave up on their Volare altogether, trading them in or sending them to the scrap heap long before their expected lifespan. In retrospect, the 1976 Plymouth Volare became a cautionary tale of what happens when a manufacturer rushes a product to market without thoroughly addressing quality concerns. What could have been a successful compact car, with its smooth ride and modern design, ended up being a symbol of American automotive decline during the 1970s. The Volare's poor reputation for build quality, rust, and mechanical failure ultimately contributed to Chrysler's financial troubles in the late 1970s and early 1980s, as consumers increasingly turned to more reliable alternatives from overseas. The Volare may have looked promising on paper, but in practice, the 1977 Dodge Diplomat was part of a rapidly changing automotive landscape, one that increasingly favored fuel efficiency, performance, and modern styling. However, the Diplomat's arrival didn't seem to embrace those trends, leaving it as a relic of the past rather than a contender for the future. Dodge intended for the Diplomat to be a reliable, mid-size car for families and professionals, but its outdated design and mediocre performance meant it failed to stand out in a competitive market. One of the most glaring issues with the 1977 Diplomat was its uninspired, boxy design. By the mid-1970s, car buyers were becoming increasingly drawn to more aerodynamic and streamlined shapes, with cars from both domestic and international manufacturers reflecting a push towards sleeker aesthetics. In contrast, the Diplomat's boxy silhouette looked as though it belonged to an earlier era, with its sharp angles and large, clunky proportions feeling out of place against the smoother, more modern lines of its competitors. It lacked the visual appeal necessary to catch the attention of consumers who were growing more style-conscious. While some buyers appreciated the traditional, no-frills look, many viewed it as stale and unimaginative, particularly in an era when the industry was trying to leave behind the excesses of the early 1970s. Inside, the interior design didn't offer much excitement either. The cabin materials were largely basic and utilitarian, with vinyl seats and plastic trim that didn't create the impression of luxury or refinement. The dash layout was simple, but it felt dated, especially as other automakers were incorporating more advanced technologies and sleeker instrument panels into their designs. While the Diplomat did provide a fair amount of space for passengers, the overall driving experience felt more utilitarian than enjoyable. It was clear that Dodge had focused on practicality, but this lack of attention to detail and comfort made the car seem less desirable in a segment where competitors were offering more appealing packages. Performance-wise, the Diplomat was equally underwhelming. Under the hood, it came with a selection of modest engines, including a 3.7-liter slant 6 and a 5.2-liter V8. While the V8 option offered a bit more power, the Diplomat never quite lived up to the expectations of buyers who wanted a car that was both practical and fun to drive. The slant 6 engine in particular was reliable but underpowered, delivering sluggish acceleration that made the Diplomat feel slow and cumbersome, especially when compared to more responsive models from Chevrolet, Ford, and even Dodge's own lineup. The car's weight further added to its lethargic feel on the road, making it less dynamic and enjoyable to drive. The Diplomat's handling didn't help matters either. While it was relatively smooth on highways, the car had a tendency to wallow through turns, with a suspension setup that prioritized comfort over agility. This wasn't uncommon for American sedans of the era, but it felt increasingly out of place as European imports, known for their precise handling and tighter steering, were making inroads into the US market. The car's bulk, combined with its lackluster power, made it feel more suited for straight-line cruising than any sort of spirited driving, further cementing its reputation as a forgettable option. Additionally, the late 1970s saw a rising demand for fuel-efficient cars as a result of the 1973 oil crisis and subsequent increases in gasoline prices. The Dodge Diplomat, with its V8 engine and heavy body, was not well suited for this new automotive reality. Its fuel economy was poor, even for the standards of the time, and this made it a less attractive option for buyers who were looking for cars that could save them money at the pump. Competitors like Honda, Toyota, and even some domestic brands had started producing more fuel-efficient models, and the Diplomat's inability to match these expectations put it at a further disadvantage. By the time the Diplomat hit the streets in 1977, the market had already moved on from the type of car it represented. It wasn't that the Diplomat was a bad car per se. It was reliable, functional, and relatively affordable. But it was a car that felt increasingly out of sync with the demands and desires of the automotive public. The 1970s were a decade of rapid change, and the Diplomat, with its outdated design and mediocre performance, struggled to keep pace. It was a car that might have made sense in the early 1970s, but by 1977, it was largely seen as a missed opportunity for Dodge to offer something more relevant and exciting. In the years that followed, the Diplomat would largely fade into obscurity, remembered as a car that simply didn't evolve with the times. For buyers seeking something new and innovative, the Diplomat was never the answer. It was a car that, despite its best intentions, felt old the moment it hit the showroom floor. The 1978 Chevrolet Malibu marked a significant departure from the glory days of muscle cars and performance-oriented vehicles. Once known for its powerful engines and stylish design in the 1960s, the Malibu of the late 1970s was a shadow of its former self, struggling to find an identity in a rapidly changing automotive market. By 1978, Chevrolet had shifted the Malibu into a more compact midsize format, but this move didn't help it stand out. Quite the opposite, in fact. The car was often criticized for its bland design and reliability issues, which ultimately hurt its reputation among buyers. The design of the 1978 Malibu was far from exciting. Compared to the bold, aggressive lines of earlier muscle car models, the new Malibu featured a boxy, conservative shape that failed to inspire enthusiasm. Its angular body and plain styling gave it a generic look that was common among many American cars during this period. There was nothing distinctive or daring about its appearance, and it seemed as though Chevrolet had sacrificed creativity in favor of playing it safe. The simple, uninspired exterior didn't capture the hearts of consumers who remembered the Malibu as a stylish and sporty car from previous decades. This bland design was further compounded by the fact that the 1978 Malibu was released during a time when consumers were increasingly drawn to more fuel-efficient, compact cars. European and Japanese automakers were gaining ground in the US with sleeker, more modern designs that emphasized aerodynamics and fuel economy, while American manufacturers like Chevrolet were still grappling with how to adapt. The Malibu's plain looks didn't help it compete with the more streamlined and futuristic designs coming from overseas. It wasn't just the lack of excitement in the design, but also the fact that the car seemed out of step with the shifting trends in automotive styling. Beyond the aesthetic shortcomings, the reliability issues of the 1978 Malibu were a significant problem for its long-term success. One of the most common complaints centered around the car's suspension and transmission, both of which were prone to failure. The suspension system was known to be fragile, often leading to a bumpy and uncomfortable ride. In addition, many owners reported issues with the transmission, which could be erratic and unreliable. These mechanical problems frustrated buyers who expected more from a brand like Chevrolet, which had a long history of producing durable, dependable vehicles. The car's engines were also underwhelming. The base engine was a 3.3-liter V6 that offered little in the way of power or performance. There were larger V8 options, but even these didn't live up to the muscle car legacy of the Malibu name. With tightening emissions regulations and the need to improve fuel efficiency, Chevrolet had to reduce the power output of its engines, which left the 1978 Malibu feeling sluggish compared to earlier models. It was clear that performance had taken a backseat to practicality, and for many longtime Malibu enthusiasts, this was a hard pill to swallow. The interior of the Malibu didn't fare much better. While it was functional and offered decent space for a mid-size car, it lacked the refinement or luxury touches that some competitors were starting to offer. The materials used were often described as cheap, with plastic trim that didn't hold up well over time. The cabin, much like the exterior, felt utilitarian, which only added to the car's image as a forgettable, uninspired vehicle. For a car that had once been known for its style and flair, this was a disappointing evolution. The late 1970s were a challenging time for American automakers, with rising fuel prices, new safety and emissions regulations, and growing competition from foreign manufacturers. In this environment, the 1978 Chevrolet Malibu didn't stand out. Its reliability issues, combined with its lackluster design and underpowered engines, made it a tough sell. While it may have been a practical choice for some buyers, it lacked the excitement and performance that had once made the Malibu a beloved name in the American car market. As a result, the 1978 Malibu became a symbol of the malaise that many American cars faced during this era. It was a time when manufacturers were trying to adapt to new realities, but often missed the mark. The Malibu, with its bland design and mechanical issues, exemplified the struggles of American automakers to stay competitive and relevant. Although the Malibu nameplate would eventually rebound in later years, the 1978 model is remembered as a low point, a car that simply couldn't live up to the legacy of its predecessors or meet the expectations of the market. The 1974 Mercury Bobcat was introduced as Mercury's version of the Ford Pinto, and while it wore a different badge and featured slight cosmetic tweaks, it couldn't escape the legacy of its predecessor. The Bobcat was essentially a rebadged Pinto, sharing the same platform, mechanical components, and unfortunately, the same reputation. This connection would become a significant problem for Mercury, as the Pinto was already marred by one of the most infamous safety scandals in automotive history: the gas tank design flaw that made it prone to catching fire in rear-end collisions. From a design perspective, the Bobcat was meant to be a more upscale alternative to the Pinto, with Mercury adding small touches like chrome accents in a slightly more refined interior to differentiate the two models. But these superficial changes did little to distance the Bobcat from its Pinto roots. Underneath, it was essentially the same car, with the same weaknesses. The upgrades Mercury applied were minor and didn't address the Pinto's deeper flaws, especially its questionable safety. The Pinto's gas tank flaw had been well publicized by 1974, and the scandal cast a long shadow over the Bobcat. Ford had designed the Pinto, and thus the Bobcat, with a rear-mounted gas tank that was vulnerable to puncture during rear-end collisions, leading to dangerous fires and even fatalities. This issue plagued both models and was one of the reasons the Bobcat found little success, despite Mercury's attempt to market it as a premium compact vehicle. For many buyers, the association with the Pinto was enough to make them steer clear of the Bobcat entirely. In addition to the safety concerns, the Bobcat suffered from the same underwhelming performance that plagued many subcompact cars of the era. Powered by small, underpowered engines, the car struggled to offer much in terms of driving excitement. The base engine, a 2.0-liter inline-4, was reliable but sluggish, and with the growing demand for more fuel-efficient vehicles, performance took a backseat to economy. However, even in this area, the Bobcat wasn't exceptional. Its fuel efficiency was decent, but not enough to make up for its other shortcomings. The build quality of the Bobcat, like the Pinto, was another issue. The car was cheaply made, and many owners reported problems with rust, particularly in colder climates where road salt was commonly used. The thin, budget-focused construction meant that the car didn't hold up well over time, with many Bobcats developing significant rust problems after just a few years on the road. This further tarnished its reputation, especially as consumers became increasingly concerned about the long-term durability of their vehicles during the economic challenges of the 1970s. While Mercury attempted to market the Bobcat as a more premium option in the compact car segment, it was clear to most buyers that they were simply getting a dressed-up Pinto. The reputation issues that came with the Pinto safety record were impossible to shake, and the Bobcat never managed to establish itself as a credible alternative. Mercury's efforts to differentiate it with small styling tweaks and more luxurious interior options weren't enough to overcome the negative press and the car's own inherent flaws. In the end, the 1974 Mercury Bobcat is remembered as a vehicle that failed to stand out. Its connection to the Pinto was both its defining feature and its downfall. Despite Mercury's attempt to offer something more appealing, the car suffered from poor safety, lackluster performance, and quality issues that made it a tough sell. It became a symbol of the challenges faced by American automakers during the 1970s. a time when companies were struggling to adapt to changing. The 1973 Oldsmobile Cutlass Salon was introduced as a part of Oldsmobile's effort to position itself in the market with a more sport-oriented option within its well-regarded Cutlass lineup. The Cutlass, particularly in its earlier iterations, had built a reputation for being a reliable, stylish, and comfortable car that could cater to a wide range of buyers. The Cutlass Salon, however, aimed to push this reputation further by offering a sportier alternative to its siblings, focusing on performance and agility. But despite these intentions, the 1973 Cutlass Salon ended up being a car that promised far more than it could deliver, falling short of expectations in critical areas like power, handling, and overall performance. One of the key reasons the 1973 Cutlass Salon faltered was its hard-or heavily built design, which, though it added to its luxury appeal, worked directly against its sporty ambitions. Built on General Motors' A-body platform, which was shared with several other models, the Cutlass Salon was a large and bulky car, making it difficult to handle and significantly weighing down its performance potential. The size and weight of the car made it feel slow, even though it was marketed as a sporty vehicle, an image that typically conjures thoughts of speed, agility, and excitement behind the wheel. The Salon's massive frame meant that no matter what engine option was offered, it couldn't shed the impression of being overly large and cumbersome, a major drawback for buyers who were seeking more nimble, responsive cars. In terms of engine performance, the 1973 Cutlass Salon came equipped with several V8 engine options, including the 350 cubic inch, 5.7-liter V8 that was commonly found in other GM cars of the era. However, despite the sizable displacement, the engine was strangled by the stringent emission control regulations that were taking hold during the 1970s. This meant that the power output was significantly reduced compared to earlier years, leaving the Cutlass Salon underpowered. Though the engine was capable of providing decent low-end torque, the sheer weight of the car severely limited its acceleration and overall performance. Even with the top-end engine option, the Cutlass Salon was far from being the sporty, high-performance vehicle it was advertised to be. The handling of the Cutlass Salon was another area where the car struggled to live up to its intended purpose. While it boasted a relatively soft suspension system, which made the ride comfortable on smooth roads, this softness came at the expense of handling precision. The car lacked the kind of firm, responsive suspension necessary for high-speed cornering and tight maneuvering, two attributes that are typically associated with sportier vehicles. As a result, the Cutlass Salon felt less secure and more sluggish when driven aggressively, further diminishing the excitement factor for anyone who hoped for a thrilling ride. Fuel efficiency was another major concern with the 1973 Oldsmobile Cutlass Salon. Coming at a time when the global oil crisis was beginning to reshape consumer priorities, large gas-guzzling vehicles like the Cutlass Salon were falling out of favor. Buyers were starting to gravitate towards smaller, more fuel-efficient cars, but the Cutlass Salon's large engine and weight made it a notorious fuel consumer. The car's poor gas mileage worked against it during a decade when the rising price of gasoline made fuel economy one of the top concerns for consumers. This lack of efficiency was a major issue, particularly for buyers who expected a more practical balance between power and fuel consumption. Beyond performance and efficiency, the Cutlass Salon was marketed as a luxury sport coupe, which led to further confusion. On the one hand, Oldsmobile tried to emphasize comfort and interior appointments, offering options like plush seating, advanced sound systems, and additional convenience features to make the driving experience more refined. On the other hand, the car's marketing suggested that it would also provide a sporty, dynamic driving experience, something it simply couldn't deliver due to its lackluster engine performance and handling issues. This confusion in identity meant that the Cutlass Salon didn't quite resonate with buyers who were looking for either a truly luxurious vehicle or a genuinely sporty car. It ended up being neither, stuck in a gray area that didn't satisfy either demographic. Despite its shortcomings, the Cutlass Salon did retain a few qualities that made it appealing to a specific subset of buyers. The car's design, for instance, was still relatively attractive, with arm-sweeping lines and a distinctive profile. that helped it maintain some level of visual appeal. The exterior styling wasn't the issue. Rather, it was the disconnect between how the car looked and how it actually performed that led to its downfall. The 1976 Cadillac El Dorado was introduced as one of the largest and most imposing luxury cars of its era, embodying the ethos of American automotive excess at a time when the industry was starting to shift toward more practical, fuel-efficient designs. As Cadillac's flagship model, the El Dorado was meant to exude prestige, comfort, and luxury, and on that front, it delivered. Its long, sweeping lines and commanding presence on the road made it a status symbol for those who could afford it. However, for all its grandeur, the El Dorado quickly became synonymous with overindulgence, and its impracticality in a world that was increasingly looking for smaller, more efficient vehicles would prove to be one of its greatest downfalls. At 224 inches in length and weighing over 5,000 pounds, the 1976 El Dorado was a true behemoth. Its massive size made it stand out, but it also introduced a number of challenges that many drivers simply weren't prepared to handle. Parking this car, for instance, was a notorious headache. The sheer length of the El Dorado made it difficult to fit into standard parking spaces, and maneuvering it in tight spaces required a level of patience and skill that few luxury car buyers were willing to exercise. Its long wheelbase also contributed to its cumbersome handling, making it far from agile on the road. While Cadillac marketed the El Dorado as a smooth highway cruiser, a car that could swallow up long distances in comfort, its day-to-day usability in urban environments left much to be desired. Another major issue that plagued the 1976 El Dorado was its front-wheel drive configuration. While front-wheel drive was relatively unusual for luxury cars of the time, Cadillac employed it in the El Dorado in an attempt to improve traction and handling. However, the combination of front-wheel drive with the car's excessive weight and size resulted in awkward handling dynamics. The front-heavy design made steering feel sluggish, particularly at low speeds, and the car's massive bulk made it difficult to achieve any sense of agility, especially on winding roads. As a luxury car, the El Dorado was designed to provide a plush, comfortable ride. But this focus on comfort came at the expense of any real driving excitement or responsiveness. Fuel economy was perhaps the most glaring problem with the 1976 Cadillac El Dorado, especially in the context of the 1970s, when the oil crisis had begun to reshape consumer priorities. The El Dorado was powered by a massive 8.2-liter V8 engine, which was the largest engine offered in a production car at the time. While this engine provided plenty of torque, it also guzzled fuel at an alarming rate. In an era when drivers were increasingly concerned with rising fuel prices, the El Dorado's abysmal gas mileage became a serious liability. Estimates put the El Dorado's fuel economy in the single digits, a figure that was simply unacceptable for many buyers who were becoming more conscious of efficiency. The enormous V8, while impressive on paper, did little to help the El Dorado in a market that was quickly shifting towards smaller, more economical cars. In addition to its poor fuel economy, the El Dorado's sheer size and weight contributed to its dismal performance in other areas. The car's acceleration was sluggish, particularly given the size of the engine, and its braking distances were long due to its weight. Though Cadillac equipped the El Dorado with features like power-assisted steering and braking to help mitigate these issues, there was only so much technology could do to compensate for the car's inherent bulkiness. As a result, the driving experience was far from nimble, and the El Dorado felt more like a barge than a sleek, high-performance luxury vehicle. For all its faults, the 1976 Cadillac El Dorado did have one significant claim to fame. It was the last model year to feature a convertible option from Cadillac. Cadillac had announced that the 1976 El Dorado convertible would be the last American convertible, which led to a surge in demand from collectors who believed that this would be their last chance to own a convertible from Cadillac. The marketing worked, and sales of the convertible El Dorado spiked, even as the car's impracticality remained an issue. While the convertible El Dorado did become a sought-after collector's item in later years, this final flourish wasn't enough to mask the car's underlying problems. In summary, the 1976 Cadillac El Dorado is often remembered as the epitome of 1970s American automotive excess. Its enormous size, poor fuel economy, and cumbersome handling made it impractical for most drivers, especially in a decade when efficiency and downsizing were becoming more important. While the El Dorado represented the height of luxury in terms of its plush interior and prestigious nameplate, it ultimately fell out of step with the market as consumer preferences shifted. The 1970 Chrysler New Yorker was a prime example of the era's fascination with large, comfortable, and luxurious sedans, built during a time when bigger was often considered better. Chrysler's New Yorker had a reputation for offering a plush ride, plenty of space, and a host of luxury features that aimed to elevate the driving experience. However, the car's excessive size, combined with its outdated styling and poor fuel efficiency, ultimately made it an impractical choice for many consumers, especially in light of the oil crisis that would soon grip the nation. At over 225 inches long, the 1970 New Yorker was one of the largest vehicles on the road. This massive size provided exceptional interior room, and the car could easily accommodate 6 passengers in comfort, with plenty of legroom and a cavernous trunk for luggage. For those who valued a smooth, cushioned ride, the New Yorker delivered. It glided over bumps and rough roads with ease, thanks to its soft suspension, making long-distance drives a breeze. Chrysler packed the New Yorker with upscale features for the time, including power windows, air conditioning, and leather seats in some configurations. For drivers seeking comfort and status, the New Yorker seemed like the ideal choice. However, the sheer size of the car also brought significant drawbacks. The New Yorker was a challenge to maneuver in city environments, where parking and navigating tight spaces became an ordeal. Its large turning radius made it difficult to handle in confined areas, and its bulk meant that even minor maneuvers required significant effort. This made it a car more suited to the open highway than the bustling streets of urban centers, and many drivers found the New Yorker to be too cumbersome for their daily routines. One of the most pressing issues with the 1970 New Yorker was its atrocious fuel consumption. Under the hood, the car was powered by a massive 7.2-liter V8 engine, which delivered an impressive amount of torque, but guzzled fuel at an alarming rate. The engine was designed in an era before fuel efficiency was a priority, and as a result, the New Yorker's fuel economy hovered around the single digits, making it one of the least efficient cars on the road. As the 1970s progressed and the oil crisis hit, consumers became more concerned with gas prices and mileage, and the New Yorker quickly fell out of favor. For many, the cost of keeping such a gas-hungry vehicle on the road became untenable. Beyond its fuel inefficiency, the styling of the 1970 New Yorker was also beginning to feel outdated. While it retained the bold, blocky lines that were characteristic of luxury cars in the late 1960s, by the early 1970s, the design was seen as somewhat stodgy. The wide chrome grille and expansive body panels gave the car a sense of grandeur, but also contributed to its excessive bulk. Many buyers were looking for sleeker, more modern designs that fell in line with the new decade's aesthetics. The New Yorker, by comparison, seemed to be stuck in the past, representing an era of automotive excess that was quickly becoming out of step with the times. Chrysler's attempts to market the New Yorker as a luxury option could only go so far in the face of shifting consumer preferences. By the mid-1970s, the oil crisis had fully taken hold, and buyers were increasingly drawn to smaller, more fuel-efficient cars. The New Yorker's combination of poor gas mileage, outdated styling, and impractical size meant that it was no longer seen as the desirable luxury vehicle it once was. Instead, it became a symbol of the excesses of the past, an era when comfort and prestige outweighed practicality. Another issue that dogged the New Yorker was its build quality. While the car was luxurious on the surface, there were growing concerns about reliability and long-term durability. The large V8 engine, while powerful, required regular maintenance, and the car's complex systems, like the power windows and air conditioning, were prone to failure. As consumer expectations shifted toward cars that were not only luxurious, but also dependable, the New Yorker's reputation began to suffer. Despite these problems, the 1970 Chrysler New Yorker still had its share of loyal fans. It represented the height of American luxury for those who prized space, comfort, and a smooth ride above all else. For long highway trips or for those who enjoyed cruising in style, the New Yorker delivered an unmatched experience. However, for the average driver, it was simply too much car, too large, too thirsty, and too outdated to be practical in the rapidly changing automotive landscape of the 1970s. In the end, the 1970 Chrysler New Yorker stands as a testament to a bygone era of American automotive design, where size and comfort were king. Its excessive proportions and inefficient engine made it a tough sell during the oil crisis, and its outdated design failed to resonate with consumers looking for something more modern.